Hello everyone, hope you all are doing good. My name is Varsha Dikshit and today I am going to deliberate on various modes of exit available to a company or ease of exit available to a company. Friends, we all know that when it comes to incorporating a company, the process is uniform. We all follow a uniform process. Of course, the documentation varies, uh, depends upon the type of company we are incorporating. However, the basic process that we follow is uniform. And the company, once incorporated, survives in terms of the provision of Companies Act and other applicable rules and regulations. However, when it comes to closing the affairs of a company, the process is circumstantial and varies from case to case. What are the various modes of closing the affairs of a company? If at all my company is eligible to offer a particular option or not, what are the pros and cons for opting a particular route of closing the affairs of a company? These are few topics that we are going to discuss today in detail. Friends, the importance of closing the affairs of a company or importance of knowing the best way to make an exit can be understood from the Chakravyuha episode of Mahabharata. We all know the consequences of not knowing the way to exit. So it is very important that one should know as to what is the best way to make an exit. We are going to discuss regarding all the ways serially. Uh, As I said, the closing the affairs of a company is a circumstantial affair and varies from case to case. So my today's discussion will be limited to discussing the various modes of closing the affairs of the business of the company and not regarding the various modes of closing the affairs of a business of a company. There's a difference between the two. When I say closing the affairs of the business of a company, that means I'm intending to close the entire business of a company. A company may have more than one businesses and the company is intending to wrap up its business. So that is something that we are going to discuss today. However, when I say closing the affairs of a business, that means out of the various business, the company is intending to close any one business. So the procedure may be demerger or reduction of share capital and so on. So in today's discussion, we are not going to discuss that topic. The discussion will be limited to discussing the modes available to closing the entire business of a company. So the agenda today is various modes of exit available, factors to be considered, tax implication, and at the end we'll discuss regarding comparative analysis. When I say various modes of exit, so the modes of exit are available under Companies Act as well as under IBC. Under Companies Act, the topics that we are going to discuss is striking off, dormant status, merger, and summary liquidation. And under IBC, we are going to discuss regarding liquidation and voluntary liquidation. So let us start with the topics one by one. Under Companies Act, the first topic is striking off. So whenever we think of closing the affairs of a company, the very first mode that strikes into our mind is striking off the name of a company. That is opt for section 248(2), file form STK2 and opt for the striking off route. But whether at all a company, whether at all my company is eligible to opt for striking off or not, so that is the prerequisite criteria that I have to check before opting for this particular route. What are the prerequisites? The prerequisites are that the company should have nil assets and nil liabilities. The company should not be in receipt of any notice from Registrar of Companies under section 248(1). What is the notice under section 248(1)? The notice under section 248(1) is about compulsorily striking off by the Registrar of Companies. When a company does not file its annual return or financial statements for a consecutive period of or a continuous period of 2 years, then Registrar of Companies may issue a show cause notice on a company. And if the company is in receipt of such show cause notice from the Registrar of Companies, then the company will not be eligible to suo motu surrendering itself to the Registrar of Companies. So that is one of the prerequisites. The other prerequisite are provided in section 249, which says that in the previous 3 months, the company should not have changed its name, should not have changed its registered office. The company should be non-active otherwise than for the purpose of striking off, and no matter of compromise or arrangement is pending before the NCLT. So these are few prerequisites that are required in order to opt for this particular mode of exit. What is the process to be followed for opting the striking off mode? The process is holding of a board meeting, extinguishing all the liabilities, taking consent of the shareholders by way of special resolution, taking approval of all the concerned authorities, and ultimately filing of Form STK2. Filing of STK2 form is what are the attachments that are required to be filed along with Form STK2. The attachments are indemnity bond, statement of nil assets and nil liabilities, fees of rupees 10,000, the affidavit from the directors, special resolution that has been passed by the shareholders of a company, and no objection certificate as may be received from the concerned authorities. So after receiving this particular form, Registrar of Companies, if satisfied, will pass the order for striking of the name of the company. So this is the basic process of striking off. Section 8 companies cannot opt for this particular route. One common question that arises when we think of striking off the name of a company or opting for this particular route is, see, suppose the business of my company has stopped for from the year 2017 or from the year 2018, and my company has not filed annual return or financial statements since then. So whether at all my company is eligible to opt for this particular route or opt for this particular method, the answer to the question is, if your company has not received any notice from the Registrar of Companies under Section 248(1), then your company will be able to opt for this particular route. The Rule 4 of the removal of name of the registrar from the Registrar of Companies rule says that no company shall be eligible to opt for this particular route if the company has not filed its annual return or financial statement until the time it has stopped its business. So if my company has already stopped its business from the year 2017 or from the year 2018, and it is not in receipt of the Registrar of Companies, or one can say that it has not yet come into the eyes of Registrar of Companies, then my company is surely eligible to opt for this particular route. Now coming to the other modes, the other mode is dormant status. Dormant status, as the name suggests, is a status, merely a status, and it is not something through which we can say that company is going to exit. So if a company is an inactive company or company is made for some future projects or so, then to stop itself from the regular filing requirements, the company can opt for this particular route. The section 455 of the Companies Act 2013 deals with the process of closing the affairs of filing an application to the Registrar of Companies for getting the dormant status. So let us understand the prerequisites that are there for opting for this particular route. The prerequisite for opting for dormant status route is that the company should be inactive company. There should not be any significant accounting transaction in the company, and the company there should not be any inquiry investigation pending against the company. So when I said there should not be any significant accounting transaction in the company, what does it mean? The meaning of significant accounting transaction has been provided in the section itself. There are 4 transactions apart from which all the transactions are considered as significant accounting transactions. What are the insignificant accounting transactions provided in the section? The insignificant accounting transactions that are provided in the section itself are payment of the fees by the company to the registrar, payment made by it to fulfill the requirement of this act or any other law, allotment of shares to fulfill the requirement of this act, and payment for maintenance of its office and records. So these are 4 expenses. Apart from this, any expenses, if at all entered by the company will not be able to opt for this particular route. The process for opting dormant status is very simple. The company has to hold a board meeting, take consent of the board of directors of a company, then company has to hold general meeting and take consent of the shareholders of a company by way of special resolution, and ultimately the company has to file form MSC1 with the registrar of companies. This MSC1 form is a STP form, and this once filed, it will generate a certificate issued by the registrar of companies. So after getting the certificate, the registrar of the name of the company will get changed from active to dormant in the master data of the company. Coming to the next process or next route available to the company, the next route is merger. We all are very much aware of this particular route. Section 230 read with section 232, and in case of small companies and holding subsidiaries, section 233 of the Companies Act provides for merger amalgamation. So when it comes to merger amalgamation, the question arises as to who can apply. Company or creditor or member, or in case the company is under liquidation, liquidator can apply for this particular route. And 233 is about fast track merger. About the merger, I have already prepared a detailed AV, and the link to that AV I'll share in the description box. That is discussed regarding the topic in brief here. The process of merger, pursuant to the merger, the transferred company gets dissolved without winding up, and the assets and liabilities of the transfer company gets vested into the transferee company. So the process involves the filing of application before NCLT. Then there are two applications that a company is required to file with the NCLT. First motion application will be for getting dispensation from the meeting of shareholders and creditors if a company has already opted consent of 90% of its shareholders and creditors by way of affidavit. If the company has not taken the consent of the shareholders and creditors, then it can apply to NCLT for NCLT convened meeting. In the NCLT convened meeting, consent of 3/4 of the members or creditors present and voted at the meeting is required. If the consent has been received, then company will be eligible to file the second motion petition for getting approval of the scheme. After getting the NOC, no objection certificate, from the respective regulatory authorities like SEBI in case of listed company, NBFC, in case of NBFC, RBI, in case of insurance company, IRDA, as may be applicable, if those regulatory authorities provide their NOC to the company, and of course income tax department and official liquidator, if they provide their no objection certificate to the company, to the NCLT, NCLT will approve the scheme. And the order of NCLT, once filed, has to be filed with the registrar of companies. So this is the process that one has to follow for merger. And after filing this application, this order of NCLT with the registrar of companies, the name of the transfer company will show as amalgamated in the master data of the company. So ultimately, the transfer company will get struck off or will get wound up. So ultimately, the company did not have to follow the entire winding up process. Pursuant to this merger process only, the transfer company will get wound up. However, the entire liability, entire assets of the company will get vested into the transferee company. That means if I'm opting for a merger process, I'm not extinguishing my liabilities. My liabilities are getting transferred to the transferee company, and transferee company has to carry on with those liabilities, whether that liability is the liability pertaining to the creditors, whether that is taxation liabilities, and all the other requirements. Fast track merger route is a route under which there is no role of NCLT. There's a role of regional director, and consent and approval of regional director is required for opting this particular route. Under this route, approval of regional director is required. Process is more or less the same. However, that involves declaration of solvency also to be taken from the majority of directors, and the approval will ultimately be required from the regional director to approve the scheme. Coming to the next option available, the next option is summary liquidation that has been provided in section 361 of the Companies Act 2013. What are the prerequisite or eligibility to opt for this particular route? The eligibility and prerequisite are provided in the section itself and the rules also. So the eligibility is the company with book value of less than 1 crore, the company with loan or including secure loan with less than 50 lakhs and turnover less than 50 crores and paid up share capital with less than 1 crore can opt for this particular process. Summary liquidation process again involves approval of regional director and does not involve role of NCLT. So regional director appoints official liquidator here. Here there is no role of insolvency professional. There's a role of official liquidator that is to be appointed by the regional director. The official liquidator will take summary of all the assets of the companies that are available for realization, will investigate into the affairs of a company and submit his report within 30 days to the regional director. And accordingly, based on the realization of assets, the official liquidator will make payment to all the creditors of the company. Of course, the creditors have to take haircut on the total claim submitted by them, and ultimately the regional director will pass order for winding up the affairs of a company. So this is the process, summary process. Now coming to the insolvency and bankruptcy part. Under insolvency and bankruptcy, we are going to discuss regarding two processes. First process is voluntary liquidation and the other one is liquidation. Voluntary liquidation, again in this topic, I have made a separate AV and I'll share the link of that AV in the description box. Let us discuss regarding this particular topic in brief. Section 59 of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code deals with the voluntary liquidation process. So what are the company or what are the eligibility criteria for opting for this voluntary liquidation process? The very eligibility criteria to opt for voluntary liquidation process is solvency of a company. The company should be solvent enough to make payment of all its creditors, and the process should not be opted to defraud its creditors. These are the basic eligibility norms available to a particular company who is intending to opt for voluntary liquidation process. The process involves taking declaration of solvency from majority of directors of a company. Then the company is required to hold a board meeting. Again, within 4 months of getting the declaration of solvency or holding the board meeting, the company is required to hold the general meeting wherein the consent of shareholders is required by way of special resolution. If there are creditors in the company, then consent of 2/3 of creditors is also required. And if there are creditors in the company, then the process of voluntary liquidation will be deemed to as commenced with effect from the date of taking consent of the creditors. Otherwise, the date of passing of shareholders resolution will be treated as the date of commencement of voluntary liquidation process. As there is no involvement of NCLT at the beginning, so the process commences with from the date of passing of special resolution itself. So pursuant to that shareholders approval, the liquidator will get appointed, and liquidator can be insolvency professional. The liquidator, once appointed, will have to make public announcement to invite the claims from the stakeholders of the company. Within 30 days, stakeholders can submit their claims thereafter as well, if admitted by the liquidator. Then accordingly, based on the claims received, the liquidator will have to prepare a list of creditors, and again, the liquidator has to realize all the assets of the company. The liquidator has to make payment to all the liabilities of the company. And as I said, the declaration of solvency is something wherein company has enough fund to make payment of all its creditors. So if there is something surplus left after paying off all the creditors, then that surplus will be distributed among the contributories of the company in terms of their capital contribution. At the end, the liquidator is required to make application for dissolution with the NCLT, and after getting approval of the NCLT, the company will be wound up. The company will be liquidated. So this is the brief of the process of voluntary liquidation. We'll discuss regarding the taxation implication, etc., at a later stage. Next is liquidation process under section 33 of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. So this process begins with the filing of application, suo motu filing of application by the company itself. What kind of company can opt for this particular route? The company which is insolvent, means the company which cannot make payment to its creditors or has defaulted in making payment of creditors can opt for this particular route. Opting for this particular route means surrendering itself. The company intends to surrender itself to the regulatory authorities that look here, I have no asset. These are the assets available. However, the list of creditors are huge. The list of creditors are more than the assets available to me. So now I am surrendering myself to you to wind up to appoint a liquidator and wind up my affairs. So what happens when it comes to liquidation of a company, or what circumstances leads to liquidation of a company? Initially, under Section 10, the company has to file an application with the NCLT for commencement of CIRP process. If the resolution plan does not receive consent of the shareholders, or for any reason get failed to get consent of the committee of creditors, then the liquidation process comes. So the process involves appointment of a liquidator by the NCLT or with the consent of the majority of committee of creditors. Then once the liquidator gets appointed, the liquidator is required to make public announcement for inviting claims from the creditor, forming a liquidation state, selling the assets of the company, realizing the assets of a company, and then making payment to all the creditors in terms of the hierarchy mentioned under Section 53 of the code, and ultimately filing for a dissolution application. Of course, the liquidator is required to periodically report to NCLT about the duties taken over by him and the tasks performed by him in a particular quarter. So this is the liquidation process. So the factors that one has to consider for before opting for a liquidation before opting for a particular mode of exit can be divided into few parts, such as eligibility norms, size of a company, cost and time involvement, solvency of a company, etc. So we'll discuss regarding these factors, and we'll see as to how these factors affect the affairs of a company in the coming slides. So let us discuss the comparison part now. What are the governing statute for the various modes of exit available to a company? Striking off governs by Section 248(2) of Companies Act 2013. Dormant status governs by Section 455 of the Companies Act 2013. Merger process, Section 230, read with Section 232 or 233 of the Companies Act 2013. Summary liquidation under Section 361 of the Companies Act 2013. Liquidation under Section 33 of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, and voluntary liquidation under Section 59 of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. Coming to the eligibility or prerequisite for striking off, as I have already discussed, the prerequisite is nil assets and nil liabilities. The company should not be in receipt of any notice from Registrar of Companies under Section 248(1). No change, the company should not have changed its name or registered office in the previous 3 months. There should not be any matter pending before the any matter pertaining to compromise or arrangement pending before the NCLT, and the company should not be active in the previous 3 months. When it comes to dormant status, the eligibility criteria, as I have already discussed above, are companies formed for the future project or for holding the assets only, the companies which are inactive company, the companies which have no significant accounting transactions. Merger requires approval of members and creditors, whether by way of affidavit or by way of NCLT convened meeting. Summary liquidation is applicable or is eligible for opting this summary liquidation process the company with low level of deposit or outstanding loan, or the company having asset value of less than 1 crore, and the other criteria that I have already discussed above are eligible to opt for the summary liquidation process. Voluntary liquidation process, the company which have failed to the resolution plan of which has failed to take consent of this majority of committee of creditors, or if the committee of creditors have decided to lead the company to liquidation before expiry of its moratorium, then liquidation process will commence. And voluntary liquidation, the eligibility criteria is solvency, and the process should not have commenced to defraud the creditors. Coming to the liabilities of director. What happens to liabilities of director? In striking of process, the director's liability will remain, and the directors will remain responsible to make payment of all the lawful claims or liabilities that may arise after striking of the in terms of the indemnity bond. If one has seen the format of indemnity bond, which is STK3 form, it is clearly mentioned that those the liabilities, if any, arises after the name of the company gets struck off, then that should be paid by the directors of the company. So the director will remain liable to make payment of all the lawful claim or all the lawful liabilities of the company. For dormant status, it is, as I said, it is merely a status. So company will remain liable. Company is required to file the financial position on annual basis and will still remain liable if at all there is any liability, because I have already said that there should not be any significant transaction. So if there is no transaction, there should not be any liability. However, if there is at all, if at all there is any liability, the liability should be, the director should be liable for. For merger amalgamation matters, as I have said, the liabilities of the transfer company will be vested into the transferee company. For summary liquidation process, liabilities of directors shall continue and may be enforced. Similar is the case of liquidation. Even in case of voluntary liquidation process as well, the directors are required to enter a declaration of solvency. So the liabilities can be of two types. One is liabilities of prosecution for wrong declaration of solvency, and the other one can be liabilities to breach the fiduciary duty. When I'm saying liabilities for prosecution of wrong declaration of solvency, that means that director has filed for declaration of solvency based on which the voluntary liquidation process of the company has commenced. However, once the process gets started, later on it came to the knowledge of the liquidator. Say suppose later on it comes to the knowledge of the liquidator that the company is not solvent. So ultimately the declaration of solvency submitted by the director become wrong, and accordingly the director will become punishable. The act of the liquidator will become punishable under section 72 of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, that provides for willful and material omission, or section 235A of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. Liabilities to breach the fiduciary duty, for this the NCLT may ask for the necessary compensation. Coming to who controls the process. The process is being controlled by, the striking off process is being controlled by the company, dormant status again by the company, merger process by the company only, summary liquidation, liquidation and voluntary liquidation process are controlled by the liquidators. In the liquidation process, the process also being controlled by the committee of creditors or consultation committee. Role of committee of creditors is up to the CRB process, and thereafter there will be role of consultation committee. Pay down the shareholders. In case of striking off, no question of paying down shareholders arises, as the company has to extinguish all its liabilities. When it comes to dormant status, no question arises because the company has merely opted for dormant status. In merger, the shareholders of the transfer company will get shares of the transferee company in terms of the exchange ratio. Under summary liquidation, the possibility of getting any payment to the shareholder is lowest in the hierarchy. Under liquidation process, the payment is to be made as per section 53, and as we all are aware that hardly any of the operational creditors get any payment, so the question of making payment to shareholder of course does not arise at all. However, in case of voluntary liquidation process, because the company is solvent enough to make payment to all its creditors, so if there will be surplus fund, that surplus fund will be distributed among the shareholders in terms of their capital contribution. Coming to the involvement of creditors, there's no involvement of creditor when it comes to striking of dormant status or summary liquidation process. However, in merger, the approval of shareholders is required for approval of the scheme. In liquidation, there will be consultation committee for advising the liquidator, And under voluntary liquidation process, if there are creditors in the company, then approval of creditors of the company for the voluntary liquidation process shall be required. Coming to the liabilities towards the creditors, under striking of liabilities, the creditors is to be paid before filing for this form, as the form requires nil assets and nil liability statement. For dormant status, the company will remain liable towards the creditors, if any, as it is merely getting the status of dormant company. For merger, liabilities of transferor company will get vested into the transferee company, as I've already said. So any kind of liability, whether it is liability of director, whether it is liability of creditors, whether it is liabilities towards any loan agreement or so, all those liabilities will get transferred to the or vested to the transferee company. Summary liquidation process is the liabilities towards the creditors is to be paid off in terms of the hierarchy. Liquidation process, section 53 provides the hierarchy. Voluntary liquidation process, though there is a hierarchy provided in the section 53, however, one can say that because the company is solvent enough, so the liquidator can make payment in terms of the amount available for making payment to the creditors. Ultimately, all the creditors will get their payment when it comes to voluntary liquidation process. So coming next, next is the appointment of professional, whether at all the appointment of professional is needed. For striking of dormant status, there is no need of appointing any professional. However, for merger, there is a need of appointing professional for evaluation, for appearing before NCLT. In case of summary liquidation, RD appoint the official liquidator. When it comes to liquidation, yes, the role of liquidator is there, and the liquidator is being appointed by the adjudicating authority. Under voluntary liquidation, again, yes, the board of directors appoint the liquidator to carry on with the process of voluntary liquidation. What is the role of professional? As I said, there is no role in striking of dormant status, so it is written not applicable here. When it comes to merger, there is a role of registered valuer for calculating the exchange ratio. Exchange ratio is something the shares of the shareholder of the transfer company will get the shares of the transfer company in terms of this particular ratio. So that ratio is to be determined by the registered valuer. And there is a role of advocate or authorized representative as well, as the company as the company requires the advocate or authorized representative to make appear or to enter appearance before the adjudicating authority. Coming to the summary liquidation process, under summary liquidation process, the role of professional will be preparing the report with respect to the affairs of a company within a period of 30 days, inviting claims, taking custody of all the assets, and discharging the dues of the creditors. Under liquidation process, Chapter 3 of liquidation regulation provides for the detailed process that is to be followed by the liquidator. Some of the process are inviting claims, verifying the claim, reporting to the adjudicating authority on time to time, and then distributing the realized proceeds among the stakeholders in terms of section 53, filing of dissolution application. So these are few of the duties that are provided for the role of the liquidator. There are other duties as well, which are detailed mentioned in chapter 3 of the liquidation regulation process. Now coming to voluntary liquidation process, the role of liquidator is more or less the same to the role of liquidation. However, here the liquidator is required to report to the contributories of the company and not to the NCLT. The role of NCLT will come at the end, at the time of dissolution of the company. Coming to role of NCLT, under striking off and dormant status, there is no role of NCLT because striking off is a process which is governed by registrar of companies. Again, dormant status is also a process that is governed by the registrar of companies. However, NCLT can bound up the stock of company. For the merger, the role of the adjudicating authority or NCLT is for dispensation with the granting dispensation with the meeting of shareholders or creditors, or passing the order for NCLT convene meeting. Then for approval of the scheme, and at the end for dissolution of the transfer company. The order for dissolution of the transfer company comes along with the order of approval of the scheme. Under summary liquidation, there is no role of NCLT because there is a role of regional director. For liquidation, there is a huge role of NCLT. The role pertains to sanction of the resolution plan or passing of liquidation order, then condonation of delays of filing of claim by the respective stakeholders of the company, or dealing all the matters that are connected with the liquidation process, periodical reporting by the liquidator, and then at the end, dissolution of the company. Under voluntary liquidation process, as I've already mentioned, the role of NCLT comes at the end at the time of dissolution of the company. Now coming to the very important part, which is taxation implication. Under Income Tax Act, striking off under section 179 of Income Tax Act says that pending tax liabilities of struck off companies for a private limited company may be recovered from the directors of the company. The similar thing is provided under section 248 as well, that says that if there is any liability of a struck off company, then that liabilities will be the directors of the company will be liable to make payment of those liabilities. When it comes to dormant status, as I repeatedly been saying, that the company is merely getting the dormant status, so the liabilities, if any, will be remain, and the company is required to file the income tax return on annual basis. Under merger amalgamation, the sections, the respective income tax sections are section 47 that provides for no capital gain transaction. The merger and amalgamation process should not be treated as a capital gain. There should not be a capital gain tax on the transfer of capital assets if the transfer company is an Indian company. Section 72A provides for carry forward of losses, accumulated losses and unabsorbed depreciation. One of the very reason for which most of the companies opt for merger process. The third one is section 35DD, which says that deduction of expenses done for the purpose of merger. The transfer company will be able to take the deduction for the expenses that has been done for the purpose of merger, 1/5 for 1/5 every year for a period of 5 years. Now coming to the summary liquidation part, income, if at all any arises during the process of summary liquidation process, will be liable for tax. Similar is the case in liquidation as well. When it comes to voluntary liquidation process, first of all, section 178(1) of the Income Tax Act says that within 15 days from the commencement of liquidation process, the company has to intimate to the adjudicating authority regarding the commencement of the process. And section 222C of the Income Tax Act says that that the amount distributed to the shareholders of the company in terms of the attributable profit or the accumulated profit, that shall be treated as dividend. And income, if any, generated during the process of voluntary liquidation will be treated as will be liable to tax. Coming to the next basis. Next basis is role of regulatory authorities. As I have said, there is mandatory NOC requirement in case of striking off from the regulatory authorities. For the dormant status, there is no such role of regulatory authorities. Under merger amalgamation, again, the NOC from the regional director, NOC from SEBI in case the company is listed, NOC from RBI in case the company is NBFC, approval of or NOC of IRDA if the company is insurance company, then approval of income tax authority and official liquidity is required. Under summary liquidation process, the reporting is to be done to the regional director. Under voluntary liquidation process, there is a regular reporting requirement to the IBBF. Under voluntary liquidation process, there is requirement of reporting to IBBI, as IBBI from time to time asks the liquidator to submit the details regarding the process or the steps taken by it for the voluntary liquidation process. Coming to the tentative timeline involved, the timeline is for the purpose of striking off 1 to 2 months. For dormant status, maximum 1 month, or one can say that 1 week if one has already filed for the dormant status application. Then for merger methods, the time taken, the tentative time taken for the purpose of merger methods will be 6 to 7 months. Summary liquidation again will be 1 to 2 months. When it comes to liquidation process, the liquidation is a case specific. Normally, it takes 2 to 3 years. However, it varies from case to case. In the voluntary liquidation process, though the regulation provides for 1 year to complete the process of voluntary liquidation, however, it again the same also varies from case to case. Say suppose if there is income tax refund pending to receive by the company, then these are the circumstances that are not in the hand of the liquidator, and liquidator has to compulsory wait for the longer period than expected. So the matter gets stretched from 1 to 2 years. Now, the last but not the least is a thing that whether these options are available for Section 8 company also. Striking of process cannot be opted by Section 8 company. Dormant status, of course, Section 8 company can also apply for getting dormant status. For merger amalgamation, Section 8 company can merge only with the other Section 8 company. The Section 8 company cannot merge with the other private limited company, or it can merge with the other private limited company after converting itself into a company as per Section 366 of the Companies Act 2013. Summary liquidation, liquidation and voluntary liquidation, there is no express exemption provided to the Section 8 company. However, we have not seen till date any matters relating to liquidation or voluntary liquidation or summary liquidation being opted by a Section 8 company. Thus, the recourse of the modes available for closing the affairs of a company varies, and it depends upon the various circumstances such as eligibility, cost involved, liabilities, asset liability position, or judicial intervention. As we all know that NCLT is already overburdened with the cases, with the IBC cases, with the merger amalgamation cases. So obviously the merger amalgamation process or the liquidation process is bit lengthy comparing to the striking of process or taking the dormant status of a company or the voluntary liquidation process. However, whether a particular option is can be opted by a company or not, that is completely circumstantial and depends upon the assets liability position or the different status of a company. One has to wisely take the option of the best particular mode to close the business of its company. So this is all about the today's session. Please let us know your comments on the topic, and let's know if you want us to discuss any particular topic. We'll be happy to address the queries. Thank you.